Hello, and welcome to a podcast. This is a time of year that in Alaska, Minnesota doesn't seem to have a name, but in Alaska it was called breakup. It isn't spring, but the snow is melting and the ground, the winter up here, the snow becomes a base for your roads. And now roads, instead of being a base of snow, are a conglomeration of slush and ruts and a little bit of mud underneath. The mud doesn't go too deep because the ground underneath is still frozen, but it is slippery, treacherous to walk, absolutely beautiful to be out after the winter. And so I am out. This morning I was woken up by, I do not know my bird calls, but I was woken up by a bird call that I haven't heard since fall. So whatever it is that comes back first in this part of the world is back. And I just feel like my life is an abundance of joy, and I'm trying to think of how to share that. So this morning I have done some writing on the book, my wife's memoirs, and I could easily sit at the table and write, but I thought I have to get out in this world. And one of the things that is in abundance is still not as high quality as it used to be when my wife was with us, but I still have an abundance of delicious food that I like to eat. And so I am ouncing might be the word. If you can inch towards a goal, then I think you can ounce towards a goal. So I was ouncing upward, maybe pounding upward. We won't go into the specifics. And I realize I need to make, this is slick. I need to make walking with my goofy pack more of a habit. So I am taking a walk on this treacherous ice. You probably can't see how much I'm slipping, with my swinging pack. If you haven't heard an episode with my swinging pack, or if I haven't talked about it, this is my brilliant solution to losing weight for myself. I was a couple of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I dropped quite a bit of weight. I hit a plateau at about 35 pounds, seemed to be stuck there, a little discouraged. And one night I went out with a backpack. I took 35 pounds, put 35 pounds in my backpack, and I went for a walk. And I came home from the walk, and when I took the backpack off, I was like, oh man, I'm so glad I'm done carrying that around. And then I realized, oh, that was what I was carrying around all day, every day. And so I started, as I lost each amount of weight, each new plateau, 5 pounds, then I'd add 5 pounds to my pack and go on a walk every day. And that was psychologically useful to me. It was probably also helpful for losing weight. But something happened a bit later. Today actually would be a day, if I weren't trying to hold a selfie stick and make a video, it would be an ideal day to have some hiking sticks. But I was hiking with my pack one day, and I had hiking sticks, and I realized that when I have hiking sticks, my arms get tired, but my core doesn't get tired. And my core, as much as I might like to have huge biceps, I'd much rather have less core. I don't need quite so much insulation on my six-pack. And so I recognized that what was happening is that when I walked with the pack, my core was getting a better workout. And so I thought about that, and I thought, well, how could I amplify that effect? And it turns out a good way to amplify that effect is this crossbar here and a weight swinging on the bottom. And the difference of me taking a walk without a pack, taking a walk with a pack, and taking a walk with my swinging pack is amazing. The swinging pack forces me to hold much more still, which is an isometric workout of my core. Not, you do sit-ups and you tighten and loosen and tighten and loosen. But when you do this, you have to have the muscles that are pulling match the muscles that are releasing perfectly. Otherwise, the swing takes you further than you meant to go. And so, might be a while before the insulation is all the way gone, but it does help, I believe. And so that's why I am out walking with this pack. And if you look at this pack and you think, what a brilliant idea, I bet someone could market that. Well, you can steal the idea. I can't stop you. Or you could call me and say, hey, let me give you 25 cents and name the pack after you, and you can make your $1 million on the Unemployed Idealist core pack, and I'll be happy. Or we could work on it together, and we could sell a whole bunch of core packs to a whole bunch of people who are sure that if they just had the newest, most unique workout equipment, then they really would lose weight. And then when they find out that that's not working for them, maybe they'll ask for some help, and they can go listen to Minus 43 and Counting, which is my plea for people to stop thinking someone can tell them how to lose weight and start making a deal with themselves on how they could and would change their life to lose weight. And that would be a great outcome. So all of that, my introduction is probably as long as my walk, because this is treacherous. Yeah, that is the opportunity presented to you on a beautiful day. So you could be my new core pack partner, or you could listen to my podcast. Here's what I want to talk about today, finally getting around to it, is the question. It's a technical question, but it's interesting to me. Maybe it'll be interesting to you. The question is, can AI tell a story? So we call it artificial intelligence. And I tend to think of intelligence specifically referring to knowledge. So if somebody is intelligence refers to the ability to solve a variety of problems. Okay, so the properly understood intelligence isn't knowledge. Intelligence is about solving a problem. And that is how you measure what we call intelligence, is we figure out not if you can solve the same kind of problem, but how rapidly you can solve unique problems. And it looks like, I listen to Jordan Peterson, and I take his references to the literature, and I find it credible, but I haven't checked up on all of them. So maybe somebody will tell me that he's missed something, and because of that I've missed it as well. But it seems like intelligence, because it is solving different kinds of problems, intelligence begins to look a little bit like how quickly can your brain run simulations. And apparently they've done tests which have demonstrated that the reaction time, the speed at which your neurons pass stimulus back and forth, how quick your nervous system works. And apparently that differs, but intelligence can be predicted very effectively simply on how quick your neurons work, which then suggests, forward or backwards engineered, it suggests that you are kind of, it's not something that you can change a lot, because it amounts to fluid intelligence, the ability to solve new problems, depends on how quickly you can run all of the possibilities and find out which of them are bad ones. So I guess I would accept that intelligence is the domain of possibility and solution. And so artificial intelligence, if it is intelligence at all, is an ability to solve, it dwells in the realm of possibility, and an engineering solution, possible solutions. Okay, what intelligence, okay, let me differ one other thing, although I'm not sure it's important to my conversation. There's a difference between an artificial intelligence and a superintelligence. So if I have the ability to conduct simulations more rapidly with a computer than I do within my own brain, what we might be talking about is a superintelligence. So my intelligence is served by things that help me gather more information more rapidly. And we may not have artificial intelligence. We may have superintelligence. They may all be guided by the person who created them and their value system. I don't think it's 100% clear that we have ever created a intelligent system that has its own set of values. And that set of values turns out to be really important. So an artificial intelligence, if there were an artificial intelligence, would tell you the possibility space of a solution. But what it couldn't tell you is the desirability of that solution. And so the question that then haunts the undertaking at a technical level, I told you this was a rather technical talk, what haunts the undertaking at a technical level is whether, if we're just trying to figure out, is this an intelligence? Is this an aid to someone else's intelligence, or is it an intelligence in and of itself? The question is, well, what would be involved besides the possibility space of a solution? So artificial intelligence can gather more information than I can, and run simulations faster than I can, and find out what is possible more quickly than I can. Does that make it an intelligence? Or does intelligence require something else? And if so, what would that something else be? And I think the answer is desirability. So I would put forward that to be an intelligence, you have to have incorporated not just the possibility space of a solution, something that could happen. Man, I'm getting off the icy road. I'm going to wander through the snow, which is going to get all jerky for you guys because the snow sometimes holds and sometimes doesn't. So this is even worse. Here. So each step down, I have to put my weight on and break through. And if I do that, it's going to be miserable because it'll twist your picture. If I do that, I don't have to walk on the ice. But this is not conducive to talking. So I will go back and try to find something on the edge of the ice that I can walk through. Okay, so I would argue, and this is arguing an idea, not the language. I get what people call intelligence, but I would say that you cannot truly divorce intelligence from a value system. Now, intelligence, if we talk about intelligence in this first domain of intelligence is the solution, then intelligence does have a value system. It has a value system of the possibility of the solution working. Okay? And I think that's a useful value system. Could this happen? And you'd be foolish to ignore it. You'd be foolish to suggest things that are impossible. But you have to understand that intelligence, certainly artificial intelligence, and much of our idea of intelligence since we came up with the scientific process, the idea of objective reality, much of that has been tilted towards the possibility within objective reality. Okay, so there's a tree. I could ask the question, could I jump up to the top branches of that tree? And intelligence would tell me, no, that's not within the realm of possibility. So anything that I suggest that has to do with jumping up and touching the top branches of that tree, there is a value put on it by the intelligence. The intelligence says that's a worthless idea because you can't do it. And I say, well, maybe I could. And so then intelligence could run all of the possibilities of me working out every day and trying to increase my vertical, of me walking with the pack and losing the extra pounds. And it would still come up with the answer that no, you can't jump to the top of that tree. So it would dismiss my idea as worthless. And that feels like a value system. And I wouldn't argue that it isn't, but there is a different value system. Okay, let's say there's nothing behind me, but we're going to ask, could I jump up and touch that little branch that is 9.5 feet above the road? Okay, now that moves into the possibility space. I could, probably not today, but I still probably could train and work out to the point where I could jump up and grab that branch. And that's where a different kind, I don't like to just switch a word and say there's two things, but I think it's contained in the idea of values. So I would ask, should I do it? Okay, and the should I do it is anchored in the possibility of it actually happening. So I could start training to jump up and touch the 9.5-foot branch. The first idea is dismissed by objective value. And objective value is something like, in the objective world, that is not dwell in the possibility space. And intelligence would tell me that. So I realized, nope, can't do that. It's a worthless idea because it's not in accordance with the possibility. And if I said, well, I'm going to go and start spending all day, every day working out so I can do that, you would say that is a bad undertaking. But when something dwells within the possibility space, I could jump up and catch the branch at 9.5 feet. I would again look at that and say, okay, well, should I? Is that a good use of my time? And you notice how immediately hey, Randy, this makes me skinny. At least it tries to. No, it actually, I found out, so I'd wear my pack, and I realized I had to hold my core steady. And so I thought, how can I increase that? And I'm like, well, yeah, this is easy. So if I move a little this way, it pulls me further. And the difference when I'm walking, I'll come walking and I'm tired, and then I'll just hold the jugs. And it's like, it's a huge relief. And I realized, so I used it for a long time, and then I've gotten away from it, but I think it's a pretty cool idea. It's a nice
day for it.
Oh yeah, just being out. But yeah, someday somebody's going to make these, and I'm going to say, I thought of them first.
Yeah, get a pack on it right now.
Hey, it's good to see you, Randy. Okay, I might leave that in because it reveals one of the challenges of the swinging pack is everybody says, what in the world are you doing? So we'll see if I decide to keep that in. Okay. So one idea is worthless because it doesn't exist in the possibility space. And intelligence tells me that, but intelligence doesn't tell me the value of doing something that does exist in the possibility space. So I could stop everything else I'm doing and start working out so I could jump up and touch the branch at 9.5 feet. Is it worth the investment? I said, is that a good idea? Right away, there's worth words. Is it worth the investment? Value word, worth. Is it a good idea? Value word, good as opposed to bad. Immediately you cross into the realm, once you are in the possibility space as defined by intelligence, you are dropped into worth. And you have to bring up the question. So here is my definition of a story. My definition of a story has two components. It has, could this happen? And should this happen? And I think that those two are essential to what we would call a story. If you are telling a story, there are those two questions which have to be addressed. Now, you don't have to answer them the same way. So a fantasy story, you say, this couldn't happen. But is it something that should happen? So you watch the fantasy story and you come away with it saying, I know this couldn't happen, but there is something of value that if it could, it should. Hoping that you'll take the fantasy story, depending how deep it is. Maybe they're hoping that it will just entertain you. And that's a good, that's a value, that's of worth. Or maybe they're hoping that you will think about it and you will say, if this should happen in a unreal world, could it happen? If it's of worth in an unreal world, would it be of worth if we could bring the idea into the real world? Okay, so both questions are part of the story. A straight fiction, you have a character, you have a hero, and a challenge, and he goes out and meets that challenge, or she goes out and meets that challenge. And if it's a realistic fiction, then you have two questions again. Could this happen? And then you could say, oh, yeah, it could happen. And it looks like maybe it should happen. So maybe it could and should happen in my life. It's a story. What if it's a horror story? Well, you have a horror story and you say, oh, that could happen. And yet it shouldn't happen. So what ought I to do to make sure that it shouldn't happen? Or maybe there's a different take on the horror stories. Maybe the horror story is that could happen and people could still survive. So maybe the should is I shouldn't be as afraid of it as it seems like I should be. So I think every story dwells in the space of a balance between a could this happen and should this happen. A story is an intersection, a specific intersection of the possibility space and the desirability. Well, what about a historical fiction? Okay, well, you could say, depending how deeply nested it is in the history, you could say this did happen. But that doesn't get you out of the question. It still is like, could it happen again? So you might tell a story that says this did happen and it was very bad and it could happen again because it happened once. So you ought to take whatever effort you can to making sure it doesn't happen again. Or you could say, yeah, this did happen and it should happen. And that could produce grateful. But I am convinced that what we mean by a story is this story of whether something could and should happen. So what happens if you go on whatever your favorite AI is and say, can you tell me a story about a dog who gets lost and comes back to his family after being gone for 3 months? And I think AI is to the point where it will tell you that story. Now, is that intelligence? No, that's superintelligence. What the AI, so-called AI, I'm challenging that it is even AI, but we'll call it that because that's what we do. What the AI is doing is saying, I can bring about an outcome that appears to be valued by a large number of human intelligences. So the story that they will tell you has value, but it does not have a value from the AI. It has a value from observing a whole bunch of real intelligences. So then my hypothesis today is that AI, by its definition, cannot tell a story. It is extremely useful in the first question of a story. Could this happen? The AI can access news stories and encyclopedia and physics and all the things it needs to access to figure out whether I or anyone like me could jump up and touch the top of that tree. Its answer will be very reliable. AI can dwell in the realm of the possibility space. And as such, there is value. Because if it can say something does not exist in the possibility space, then it's kind of foolish to pursue it. So I go and I ask every AI available, if I worked really hard, could I jump up and touch the top of this tree? And they all tell me, no, that's a bad idea, value word, that is a bad idea because it dwells in the space of impossibility. Then there is a value, but it is not the same value when I ask it, could I jump up and touch that branch that's 9.5 feet above me, above the ground? And then I could say, well, is it worth spending that much time? And where does it go to figure out if it's worth spending that much time? It goes from its intelligence, it's weighing and running simulations on the objective facts. It immediately has to shift to observing intelligences. And so it could come up with a good answer, but the value would not be from the AI. The value would be from observing real intelligences, not artificial intelligences. So, why am I talking about this? Well, because I'm writing a story. I'm writing a lot of stories. And I'm interested in the structure of the story, particularly because I'm writing my wife's memoirs. When I first conceived of writing her memoir, she has a fascinating past. She grew up in an Anabaptist sect, shut off from the dominant society. When she was of age, she decided that she was going to leave it. She left it. And when she was working as a nanny, I met her. And so she went, she set a new life, but she did something that was very amazing. And that is she tried to mine her life in that fundamental restrictive environment for value. So she didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. She worked really hard to find, using the symbology, she really worked really hard to find all the babies. And I'm glad she did. It was fascinating. I think it's a great story. But the telling of that story was, I didn't know how to tell that story. And I didn't want to just tell it as oh, this happened, and then, oh, I remember this happened, I remembered that happened. I didn't want to tell it as a sequential memoir. Well, one of the possibilities is you flip something. So then you get to one exciting point and you flip the memoir and then you backfill. And I thought about that and I was like, no, I don't think it's worth that. And so I'm writing her memoir as a true memoir nested in a fictional story. And in the fictional story, a series of events bring this young lady to the place where she is very interested in my wife's background. And she comes to her for her history and probes for it. There's a dog. Oh, there we go. Hey, Jingo. Look, he's shy. There he is. And so it's forcing me to look at the structure of a story and to try to decide if what I'm doing is going to be too confusing. But it led me to this idea of what is at the heart of a story. And as soon as I came to that as the heart of a story, I realized that there is a fundamental challenge to AI. And I am hoping, I could start a whole nother podcast right now, but I am hoping that difference, that inability of artificial intelligence to tell a real story will be the limit to its power. We have been dwelling in the story. Even across the board, our meaningful religious documents they have been stories. And it doesn't seem like it should be. That seems to be, it'd be better if our deep theological documents were treatises on theology, but they aren't, they're stories. And so the idea is that if there is something that will protect us from the overreaches of AI, it might be the fact that always what has been deeply meaningful to us has been nested in stories. And AI can't tell stories. Superintelligence can tell stories. And I will tell you that I am far more afraid of superintelligence than artificial intelligence, because superintelligence is only as good as the intelligences that it is observing. You don't need to look at all my junk cards. Okay, superintelligence is way more dangerous because it is only as good as the flawed intelligence that it magnifies. So it's confusing for some of you, maybe it's hopeful for some, that our fear of AI might be overcome by something as ancient as the telling of stories. That's my idea. I hope you enjoyed this. I enjoyed my walk. I feel skinnier already. Happy trails.